The pallbearers froze mid-step, the small white coffin suspended between earth and sky as Duke's desperate claws scraped against the polished wood. Martha Sullivan's weathered hands trembled as she watched her granddaughter's German shepherd refuse to let go, his massive frame draped protectively across 6-year-old Lily's final resting place. This wasn't grief, it was something else entirely. Gasps rippled through the crowd of 200 mourners as Duke's whimpering grew frantic, his amber eyes wild with an urgency that made seasoned farmers step back in unease. The funeral director's clipboard clattered to the ground as he stumbled backward, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. Martha's mind flashed to Tuesday morning. Lily's gap-toothed smile as she promised to be careful by the pond, Duke's strange whining that had seemed like ordinary jealousy. Then, "Put the coffin down," Martha commanded, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade, though her heart hammered against her ribs. What did Duke know that 200 grieving souls didn't, and why wouldn't he let them bury her baby? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 4 days earlier, Millbrook, Tennessee had been just another sleepy Appalachian town where the biggest excitement was Friday night high school football and Sunday morning church bells. Population 2,847, where everybody knew everybody's business, and the closest thing to scandal was Martha Sullivan raising her late son-in-law's daughter after that good-for-nothing Rebecca ran off with her drug habit. Martha had been doing just fine with 6-year-old Lily Rose Whitman, thank you very much. At 72, she might have creaky knees and bifocals thick as mason jars, but she had more love in her little finger than most folks managed in a lifetime. The child needed stability, and Lord knows Jonathan, bless his heart, was doing his best working 2 jobs to keep food on the table and the lights on. Lily was pure sunshine with blonde curls that caught the light like spun gold and blue eyes that sparkled with mischief. That child could charm the birds from the trees with her gap-toothed grin and endless chatter about becoming a veterinarian, just like on TV. She'd found a wounded sparrow last spring and nursed it back to health in a shoebox, talking to it like it understood every word. Martha often caught her having full conversations with Duke, the German shepherd they'd rescued from the county shelter 3 years back. Duke wasn't just any dog, that much had been clear from day one. When they'd walked into that shelter, every other dog was barking and jumping, desperate for attention. Duke sat perfectly still in the back corner, those intelligent amber eyes watching them with an almost human understanding. The moment Lily pressed her tiny palm against the chain link, Duke had walked over and sat down, placing his massive paw against hers through the fence. "He chose me, Grandma Marty," Lily had whispered with absolute certainty. And he had. Duke shadowed that little girl like her personal guardian angel, sleeping beside her bed every night, walking her to the school bus every morning, waiting at the exact same spot every afternoon. Martha had never seen such devotion in an animal. Sometimes she'd catch Duke staring at Lily with an expression so tender it made her old heart ache. When storms came through the mountains, Duke would position himself between Lily and the windows, solid as a mountain himself. Jonathan worked the early shift at the sawmill and evenings at Peterson's Hardware, trying to make ends meet in a town where good jobs had dried up faster than creek beds in August. The boy, though at 38 he was hardly a boy, carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Martha watched him kiss his sleeping daughter goodbye every morning at 5:30, his face soft with love and heavy with worry. Rebecca's abandonment had nearly broken him, but Lily kept him going. That child was his whole world, and Martha's too. They were an unconventional family held together by love stronger than blood, an old woman, a struggling father, a precious little girl, and one extraordinary dog who seemed to understand that protecting Lily was his sacred duty. Tuesday, October 15th, started like any other autumn morning in Millbrook. Martha was humming an old hymn while scrambling eggs when she felt it, that peculiar unease that settled in her bones like approaching weather. She'd learned to trust these feelings over 7 decades of living. Her grandmother used to call it the knowing, and Martha had inherited it along with her blue eyes and stubborn streak. Duke felt it too. Instead of his usual calm vigilance, he paced the kitchen like a caged animal, whining softly and blocking the doorway every time Lily tried to leave for school. When the yellow bus rumbled up the gravel drive, Duke planted himself firmly between Lily and the door, his amber eyes wide with distress. "What's gotten into you, boy?" Martha murmured, scratching behind his ears. But Duke wouldn't be comforted. He followed Lily to the bus, something he'd never done before, and stood watching until the vehicle disappeared around the bend. The day dragged on with that same oppressive feeling hanging over everything like fog. Martha found herself checking the clock constantly, counting the hours until Lily would be home. Duke refused his breakfast and spent the morning staring out the window toward the school, occasionally releasing low whimpers that made Martha's skin crawl. At 3:47 p.m., Lily burst through the front door with her usual enthusiasm, backpack flying and ponytails bouncing. "Grandma Marty, we saw a real live owl today. Mrs. Henderson says they can turn their heads all the way around." Martha's relief was immediate and overwhelming. The child was safe, chattering about her day, Duke finally relaxing as he pressed against Lily's legs. Maybe the morning's anxiety had been nothing more than an old woman's overactive imagination. "Can I play outside, please? It's so pretty today, and I want to show Duke the owl dance, Mrs. Henderson taught us." Lily was already pulling on her jacket, eyes bright with excitement. Martha glanced at the laundry basket overflowing in the corner. She'd been putting off washing for days, and Jonathan's work clothes wouldn't clean themselves. "Stay where I can see you from the kitchen window," she called, already heading toward the washing machine. "And don't go near the pond without me." "I won't. Come on, Duke." Lily's laughter floated through the house as she and Duke headed outside. Martha lost herself in the rhythm of sorting clothes, her mind wandering to grocery lists and upcoming doctor appointments. The washing machine's gentle hum and the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows created a peaceful cocoon. She was folding Jonathan's work shirts when she realized she couldn't hear Lily's voice anymore. The silence hit her like a physical blow. She dropped the shirt and rushed to the kitchen window, scanning the yard. Empty. Her heart began to race as she called out, "Lily! Lily Rose, where are you?" Only silence answered. Martha's feet carried her outside before her mind could catch up, calling Lily's name with increasing desperation. The old pond sat beyond a stand of maple trees, about 50 yards from the house. It wasn't deep, maybe 3 feet at the center, but it was where the family had always gone swimming in summers past. Lily was a decent swimmer for her age, but the water would be shockingly cold this time of year. The sound that reached her ears made her blood freeze, Duke's frantic barking, high-pitched and desperate in a way she'd never heard before. Martha ran toward the sound, her 72-year-old legs pumping harder than they had in years, branches catching at her sweater as she crashed through the trees. The scene that greeted her was every grandmother's nightmare. Lily floated face down in the shallow water near the pond's edge, her blonde hair fanned out like seaweed. Duke was in the water beside her, his powerful jaws clamped around the back of her jacket, trying desperately to drag her toward shore. "Oh God! Oh God! Oh God!" Martha chanted as she splashed into the frigid water, her house slippers filling with mud. Together, she and Duke managed to pull Lily's limp body onto the grassy bank. The child's lips were blue, her skin pale as porcelain, water streaming from her nose and mouth. Martha's hands shook as she tilted Lily's head back and began CPR, the way she'd learned in a Red Cross class decades ago. "Come on, baby girl. "Come on," she whispered between breaths, pressing on the tiny chest, feeling the delicate ribs beneath her palms. Duke paced beside them, whimpering and nudging Lily's still form with his nose. 911. She needed to call 911. Martha fumbled for her cell phone with trembling fingers, nearly dropping it twice before managing to dial. "Emergency services, this is my granddaughter. She's not breathing. She fell in the pond." The words tumbled out in a rush as she continued chest compressions. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. What's your address?" The dispatcher's voice was professional, steady. 142 Maple Ridge Road, Millbrook. "Please hurry, she's only 6 years old. Paramedics are on the way. Are you performing CPR?" "Yes, but she's not responding. She's so cold, so still." The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Martha worked over Lily's motionless body while Duke maintained his vigil, occasionally throwing back his head to release haunting howls that echoed across the valley. Neighbors began arriving. Word traveled fast in a small town, but Martha barely noticed them. Her entire world had narrowed to this one small girl who meant everything to her. The ambulance finally screamed up the gravel drive, red lights painting the autumn trees in hellish color. Jake Morrison, the young EMT, took over CPR while his partner Sarah Chen prepared equipment. They worked with professional efficiency, speaking in medical shorthand that Martha couldn't follow. "Got a pulse," Jake announced after what felt like an eternity. "Weak and thready, but it's there." Hope flared in Martha's chest like a struck match. Lily was loaded onto a stretcher and into the ambulance, Duke trying desperately to follow until Martha grabbed his collar. "We'll meet them there, boy," she promised, though her own voice sounded hollow. The 20-minute drive to Millbrook General felt endless. Martha called Jonathan from the passenger seat of her neighbor's truck, hearing his world shatter through the phone line. "I'm coming," he said simply, and she knew he was already running for his car. At the hospital, Duke somehow slipped past security and found his way to the pediatric wing, where he took up position outside the treatment room doors. No amount of coaxing could move him. He simply sat there, massive and immovable, watching those doors with an intensity that made even the doctors uncomfortable. Inside, Dr. Harrison Reed was working to save Lily's life, or so everyone believed. Dr. Harrison Reed emerged from the treatment room after 2 hours with the practiced expression of a man who had delivered devastating news countless times before. His silver hair was perfectly combed despite the emergency, his white coat spotless, but something in his pale blue eyes seemed off, a flicker of nervousness that Martha's sharp gaze caught immediately. Jonathan had arrived 30 minutes earlier, still wearing his sawmill uniform, wood shavings clinging to his work boots. He stood beside Martha in the sterile hallway, both of them holding their breath as Dr. Reed approached. Duke remained motionless by the treatment room door, his amber eyes tracking the doctor's every movement with an intensity that made several nurses step aside. "I'm sorry," Dr. Reed began, his voice carrying the weight of practiced sympathy. "We did everything we could. The cold water, the time underwater, it was just too long. Lily's gone." The words hit Jonathan like physical blows. His knees buckled, and he would have collapsed if Martha hadn't grabbed his arm with surprising strength. Her own world tilted sideways, but decades of mountain resilience kept her upright. "No," she whispered, the word escaping her lips like a prayer. "No, that can't be right." Dr. Reed's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his clipboard, a detail that Martha filed away in the corner of her mind even through her grief. The hypothermia was severe. Her core body temperature dropped too low for too long. "I know this is difficult to accept, but I want to see her." Jonathan's voice was raw, broken. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Dr. Reed stepped aside, but Duke suddenly rose to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest as the doctor passed. The sound was so unexpected, so unlike Duke's usual gentle nature, that everyone in the hallway turned to stare. "Easy, boy," Martha murmured. But Duke's hackles remained raised, his eyes fixed on Dr. Reed with unmistakable hostility. The doctor hurried away, claiming urgent patients to attend to, leaving behind a faint smell of expensive cologne and something else, something that made Duke's nostrils flare with agitation. Inside the treatment room, Lily lay on the hospital bed looking for all the world like she was simply sleeping. Her blonde curls had been brushed back from her face, her skin pale but somehow peaceful. Jonathan collapsed into the chair beside the bed, taking her small hand in his larger ones. "She's still warm," he said suddenly, looking up at Martha with desperate hope. "Feel her hand, Grandma Marty. She's still warm." Martha touched Lily's forehead, her cheek, her wrists. The child's skin held a warmth that seemed inconsistent with death. But what did she know about such things? Dr. Reed was the expert. Dr. Reed had been taking care of this town for 15 years. Dr. Reed had delivered half the babies in Millbrook and held the hands of their grandparents as they passed on, but Duke knew something was wrong. The German shepherd had managed to slip into the room and now stood beside the bed, his massive head lowered to sniff gently at Lily's face and hands. His tail, which should have been tucked in grief, wagged tentatively. He whined softly, pawing gently at the bedsheet as if trying to wake her up. "He doesn't understand," Jonathan said brokenly. "Dogs don't understand death." Martha wasn't so sure. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Animals know things we've forgotten how to see, child. Don't be so quick to dismiss what they're trying to tell you." The funeral home arrived to transport Lily's body, but Duke refused to let them near the bed. Robert Blackwood Sr., who had been running Blackwood Son's funeral home for 50 years, had never encountered such behavior. The dog wasn't aggressive exactly, but he positioned himself between the gurney and the bed like a living barrier. "I've seen grieving pets before," Robert told Martha quietly, "but this is different. In all my years, I've never seen a dog react quite like this. It's almost like he's trying to protect her from something." Those words lodged in Martha's heart like thorns. Protect her from what? From death itself? From being taken away? Or from something else entirely? The next 24 hours passed in a haze of casseroles from neighbors, flower deliveries, and well-meaning visitors offering condolences. Duke refused to leave the funeral home, positioning himself outside the building where Lily's body lay in preparation. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't respond to any attempts to coax him away. Word spread through Millbrook like wildfire. The loyal dog keeping vigil for his beloved little girl became the talk of every coffee shop, beauty salon, and church pew in town. Some found it touching, a testament to the bond between child and pet. Others found it disturbing, unnatural, a dog that didn't know its place. The older residents, those whose grandparents had lived closer to the land and trusted animal instincts, began to whisper among themselves. "My granddaddy always said dogs could sense things," offered Ethel May Peterson at the grocery store. "Said they could smell death coming and life lingering when doctors couldn't." But the younger generation, college-educated and scientifically minded, dismissed such talk as superstition. "Grief does funny things to animals," Dr. Susan Kim, the town veterinarian, explained to anyone who would listen. "Dogs form strong attachments. Duke just doesn't understand that Lily is gone." Dr. Reed, meanwhile, seemed increasingly agitated by Duke's behavior. He stopped by the funeral home twice, ostensibly to check on the family, but Martha noticed how his hands shook when Duke growled at his approach. "That animal needs to be sedated," he told Robert Blackwood. "This display is unhealthy for everyone involved." But Robert, whose family had been burying Millbrook's dead since the 1920s, disagreed. "I've seen a lot of strange things in this business, Doc. Sometimes animals know things we don't. No harm in letting the dog say his goodbyes." Jonathan was caught between worlds, his rational mind telling him that Duke was simply grieving, his heart breaking every time he saw the dog's unwavering vigil. The sight of Duke lying beside the funeral home's front door, head resting on his paws but eyes always alert, watching for any sign from inside, was almost more than he could bear. "Maybe Dr. Reed is right," he told Martha on the second night. "Maybe we should have Duke sedated until after the funeral. This can't be healthy for him." "That dog isn't hurting anyone," Martha replied firmly. "If Duke needs to be there, then that's where he should be." But privately she was beginning to wonder if there was more to Duke's behavior than simple grief. The dog's absolute certainty, his refusal to accept what every human knew to be true, planted seeds of doubt in her mind. Late that second night, Martha found herself standing outside the funeral home, watching Duke through the window. The dog wasn't sleeping. He sat perfectly still, ears perked, as if listening for something only he could hear. Occasionally, he would whine softly and paw at the door, but not with the frantic energy of an animal trying to get inside. It was more purposeful than that, more deliberate. "What do you know, boy?" Martha whispered through the glass. "What are you trying to tell us?" Duke's head turned toward her voice, and for a moment their eyes met through the window. In that gaze, Martha saw something that chilled her to the bone. Not grief, not confusion, but absolute certainty. Duke knew something important, something that the adults in their grief and shock had missed. As Martha walked home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Animals know things we've forgotten how to see." The question was, what had they all forgotten to see? And more importantly, was there still time to remember? Back at the funeral home, Duke resumed his vigil, his amber eyes fixed on the building where Lily lay. Somewhere in the darkness, he could sense what no human instrument could detect: the faint, persistent rhythm of a heart that hadn't quite given up beating. The third day brought unwelcome visitors and uncomfortable questions. Martha was sitting on her front porch watching Duke's distant form outside the funeral home when a battered Honda Civic pulled into her driveway. Her heart sank as Rebecca Whitman stepped out, looking every bit as broken as Martha remembered from the day she'd walked out on her family 3 years ago. Rebecca had once been beautiful in that fragile, ethereal way that attracted troubled men like moths to flame. Now, at 34, she looked older than Martha in some ways. Her blonde hair hung limp and unwashed, her clothes wrinkled and stained. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and chemical dependencies that had consumed whatever maternal instincts she might have possessed. "I heard about Lily," Rebecca said, her voice hoarse and small. She stood at the bottom of the porch steps as if afraid to come closer, fidgeting with the sleeves of her too large sweater. "I came as soon as I could." Martha's jaw tightened. "As soon as you could? Your daughter's been dead for 3 days, Rebecca. Where exactly have you been?" I was getting clean. There's a place in Nashville, and I thought—" Rebecca's voice cracked. "I thought I could get better, come home, be a real mother to her. I never thought—" She broke down then, sobbing with the raw grief of someone who had lost their last chance at redemption. Despite her anger, Martha felt a stab of pity. She'd raised enough children to recognize genuine anguish when she saw it. "She asked about you, you know. Right up until the end, she'd ask when Mommy was coming home." The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. She collapsed onto the bottom step, her thin shoulders shaking. "I was going to surprise her. I've been clean for 2 months, Martha. 2 whole months. I had a job lined up, a little apartment. I was going to prove I could be the mother she deserved. Then where have you been for the past week? Martha's voice was sharp, honed by decades of getting truth out of reluctant children. Mrs. Henderson at the motel says you've been staying there since last Tuesday. Rebecca's head snapped up, guilt flashing across her features before she looked away. I needed time to work up the courage. I knew Jonathan wouldn't want to see me, knew you'd be angry. I was just watching, making sure she was okay before I tried to contact you. Watching from where? Different places. The school sometimes, or the park. I saw her playing with that big dog of hers. Rebecca's voice grew wistful. She's gotten so tall, so beautiful. She looks just like John did at that age. Martha's blood chilled. You were watching the house? Not watching like that, Rebecca said quickly. Just trying to get a glimpse of her. I never got close, never approached her. I swear on my mother's grave, Martha, I would never do anything to hurt my baby. But something in Rebecca's manner was setting off alarm bells in Martha's mind. The way she avoided eye contact when talking about her watching, the defensive way she wrapped her arms around herself, the slight tremor in her voice that had nothing to do with grief. Where exactly were you on Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca, when Lily drowned? I was at the motel, sleeping. I'd been up all night working up the nerve to call Jonathan. The words came too quickly, too rehearsed. You can ask the desk clerk. I never left my room. Martha stood slowly, her arthritis forgotten in the face of mounting suspicion. You're lying to me, child. I can see it in your eyes, same as when you were 16 and sneaking out to meet that Morrison boy. Rebecca's facade cracked, tears streaming down her face. I can't tell you the truth. You'll hate me more than you already do. Try me. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire until Rebecca finally broke. I was there, she whispered. At the pond. I wanted to see her playing. Just once, before I tried to make contact. I hid in the trees and watched her with the dog. She was so happy, Martha. So perfect and innocent and happy. Martha's hands clenched into fists. You were there when she fell in? She didn't fall. Rebecca's voice was barely audible. I think someone pushed her. The words hit Martha like a thunderbolt. What do you mean, someone pushed her? I couldn't see clearly through the trees, but there was someone else there. A man. He was talking to Lily, and she seemed scared. Then there was a splash, and she was in the water. Rebecca's voice gained strength as the truth poured out. The dog started barking and ran into the water after her. The man just stood there for a moment, watching, then he walked away like nothing had happened. Why didn't you help her? Why didn't you call for help? I tried! Rebecca's voice rose to near hysteria. I ran toward the pond, but by the time I got close enough to see clearly, you were already there, pulling her out with the dog. I panicked, Martha. I thought if I stayed, if people found out I was there, they'd blame me. They'd say I did it. Martha sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. Did you recognize the man? I couldn't see his face clearly, but he was wearing nice clothes, a suit or sport coat, and he had a black medical bag with him. The blood drained from Martha's face. A medical bag? Like doctors carry. Old-fashioned, black leather. Rebecca looked up with desperate eyes. You believe me, don't you? I know I'm a terrible mother. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I swear on Lily's life, on her memory, I'm telling the truth. Martha's mind was racing, pieces of a horrible puzzle beginning to fall into place. Dr. Reed's nervousness, his shaking hands, Duke's violent reaction to his presence, the rushed pronouncement of death, the refusal to allow an autopsy. This man with the medical bag, how tall was he? Medium height, maybe 6 feet. Silver hair. He moved like an older man, careful and deliberate. Dear God in heaven, Martha breathed. Dr. Harrison Reed fit that description perfectly. But why would their trusted family doctor want to hurt Lily? What possible motive could he have? Rebecca saw the recognition in Martha's eyes. "You know who it was, don't you?" Before Martha could answer, another car pulled into the driveway. Jonathan's battered pickup truck came to a stop behind Rebecca's Honda, and Martha watched her former son-in-law's face go through a series of emotions as he spotted his ex-wife. Shock gave way to anger, then to something that might have been hope before settling into weary resignation. "What is she doing here?" Jonathan asked as he climbed the porch steps, deliberately not looking at Rebecca. "She has something to tell us," Martha said carefully. "Something about Tuesday afternoon." Jonathan's eyes snapped to Rebecca's face. "What about Tuesday afternoon?" Rebecca repeated her story, her voice growing stronger with each telling. Jonathan listened with growing horror and disbelief, his hands clenching and unclenching as he processed what she was saying. "You're telling me someone deliberately hurt Lily, and you just stood there and watched?" "I couldn't see clearly," Rebecca protested, "and by the time I realized what was happening, you and Martha were already there." "I was scared, John. I know that makes me a coward, but I was terrified that if I came forward, no one would believe me. Everyone would assume I was the one who hurt her." "Maybe you did," Jonathan said coldly. "Maybe this whole story is just another one of your lies to cover up what really happened." "The man Rebecca described," Martha interrupted before the argument could escalate, "sounds like Dr. Reed." Jonathan stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "Dr. Reed? Martha, that's crazy. He's been our family doctor for years. He delivered Lily, for God's sake. Why would he want to hurt her?" "I don't know," Martha admitted. "But think about it. His behavior has been strange since Tuesday. The way he rushed to pronounce her dead, the way he's been avoiding us, the way Duke reacts to him. And there's something else, something I haven't told you." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I've been asking around, talking to some of the other families he's treated recently. There have been 3 other child deaths in the past 6 months, all ruled natural causes by Dr. Reed. All children who died suddenly, unexpectedly, with no clear medical reason." Jonathan's face had gone white. "You think he's been killing children?" "I think we need to start asking some very hard questions," Martha said grimly. "And I think Duke's been trying to tell us something we've been too grief-stricken to hear." Meanwhile, at the funeral home, Duke had abandoned his usual patient vigil for something more urgent. He was scratching at the door with increasing desperation, his whines growing louder and more insistent. Robert Blackwood, Sr., finally opened the door to quiet the animal, and Duke immediately bolted inside, heading straight for the preparation room where Lily's body lay. "Hey now, boy, you can't be in here," Robert called, following the dog down the hallway. But Duke ignored him, skidding to a stop beside the metal table where Lily rested under a white sheet. The dog's behavior was unlike anything Robert had ever witnessed. Instead of the mournful acceptance he'd seen in other grieving pets, Duke was alert, excited even. His tail wagged tentatively as he sniffed at the air around the table, and he began to whine in a tone that sounded almost joyful. "What's got into you, boy?" Robert murmured, then noticed something that made his blood run cold. The sheet covering Lily's small form was moving slightly, rising and falling in a rhythm so faint it was almost imperceptible. Robert's hand shook as he pulled back the sheet. Lily's face was still pale, still peaceful, but there was something different about her appearance. Her lips, which had been blue-tinged with death, showed the faintest hint of pink, and when he placed his weathered hand on her forehead, the skin felt warm to the touch. "Sweet Jesus," Robert whispered, then raised his voice to a shout. "Call Dr. Kim! Call her right now!" Dr. Susan Kim, Millbrook's veterinarian, was also the closest thing the town had to a backup medical professional when Dr. Reed wasn't available. She arrived at the funeral home within minutes, her medical bag in hand and her face set with professional skepticism. "Robert, you know I'm not licensed to practice human medicine," she began, then stopped short when she saw Duke's agitated state and the way he was pawing gently at Lily's hand. "Just take a look," Robert pleaded. "Something's not right here. That dog's been trying to tell us something for 3 days, and maybe it's time we listened." Dr. Kim approached the table cautiously, her trained eye taking in details that others might miss. She checked Lily's pulse points, listened to her chest with a stethoscope, and examined her pupils with a small flashlight. "There's definitely cardiac activity," she said slowly. "Faint, irregular, but present, and her body temperature is too high for someone who's been dead for 3 days. She looked up at Robert with troubled eyes. "I think we need to call Martha and Jonathan immediately, and maybe we should think twice about calling Dr. Reed." The call from Robert Blackwood came at 4:17 p.m. on that third day, just as Martha was trying to process Rebecca's devastating revelation about Dr. Reed. Jonathan answered his cell phone with the weary resignation of a man who had fielded too many sympathy calls, but Robert's urgent voice cut through his exhaustion like a blade. "John, you and Martha need to get down here right now, and bring Rebecca with you. Something's happening with Lily." "What do you mean, something's happening?" Jonathan's voice cracked with a mixture of hope and terror. "Robert, she's... Just get here, now. And John, don't call Dr. Reed. Whatever you do, don't call Dr. Reed." The drive to the funeral home took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. Martha gripped the dashboard of Jonathan's truck while Rebecca sat in the back seat, all three of them afraid to voice what they were thinking. Duke's vigil, his absolute refusal to accept Lily's death, Rebecca's story about the man with the medical bag, pieces of an impossible puzzle that might, just might, add up to a miracle. They found Robert pacing in the funeral home's parking lot, his usual composed demeanor shattered. Dr. Susan Kim's veterinary truck was parked beside the building, and through the windows they could see Duke standing guard beside a metal table, his tail wagging with an energy none of them had seen since Tuesday. "Before you go in there," Robert said, his voice shaking, "I need you to prepare yourselves. What you're about to see, it doesn't make medical sense. Dr. Kim is in there now, and she's as confused as I am." They found Dr. Kim bent over Lily's still form, a stethoscope pressed to the child's chest. Her usually steady hands were trembling as she looked up at the family. "I'm not qualified to make a definitive diagnosis," she began carefully, "but there are signs of life here. Faint, irregular, but definitely present." Martha's legs nearly gave out. Jonathan caught her arm, his own face white with shock. Rebecca pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How is that possible?" Jonathan whispered. "She's been dead for 3 days. Dr. Reed pronounced her dead. He signed the death certificate." "That's what we need to figure out," Dr. Kim said grimly. "But right now we need to get her to a real hospital. The closest cardiac unit is in Knoxville, about 40 minutes away. I've already called for an ambulance." Duke, meanwhile, had positioned himself beside Lily's head, gently licking her pale cheek with a devotion that made everyone in the room feel like they were witnessing something sacred. His amber eyes were bright with an intelligence that seemed almost human, as if he had known all along that this moment would come. "You saved her," Martha whispered to Duke, scratching behind his ears with trembling fingers. "You knew, didn't you? You knew she was still fighting." The ambulance arrived with sirens blaring, bringing with it a team of paramedics who looked skeptical until they began their own examination. The lead paramedic, a woman named Sarah Chen, who had worked the original call 3 days earlier, shook her head in disbelief as she checked Lily's vital signs. "This is impossible," she muttered. "I pronounced this child dead myself on Tuesday." There was no pulse, no respiration, no response to stimuli. "What could cause something like this?" Martha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Severe hypothermia can sometimes create a death-like state," Sarah explained as she prepared Lily for transport. "But the duration we're talking about here, it's unprecedented. And the fact that she's showing signs of improvement rather than deterioration—" She shook her head again. "I've never seen anything like it." As they loaded Lily into the ambulance, Duke tried to follow, but the paramedics gently blocked his path. The dog's anguished howl echoed through the streets of Millbrook, a sound of such pure desperation that several neighbors came outside to see what was happening. "He can ride with us," Jonathan decided suddenly. "If Lily wakes up, she'll want to see him. And after everything he's done—" He looked at the paramedics with determination. "That dog doesn't leave her side." The 40-minute drive to Knoxville General Hospital passed in a blur of sirens and medical jargon. Dr. Kim had insisted on accompanying them, her veterinary expertise somehow seeming more trustworthy than anything Dr. Reed had offered. Duke lay beside Lily's stretcher, his massive head resting gently on her arm, his eyes never leaving her face. At the hospital, a team of specialists took over Lily's care while the family waited in a sterile conference room. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the head of pediatric cardiology, emerged after 2 hours with an expression of professional bewilderment. "Your daughter is alive," she announced without preamble. "Her vital signs are weak but stable, and we're seeing steady improvement. Her core body temperature has returned to normal, and her brain activity appears to be intact." "But how?" Jonathan asked. "How is any of this possible?" "The human body's capacity for survival sometimes exceeds our medical understanding," Dr. Morrison replied carefully. "Severe hypothermia can create a state that mimics death so closely that even experienced medical professionals can be fooled. The cold water may have actually preserved her brain function while her body shut down to conserve energy." "So she's going to be okay?" Martha's voice was heavy with hope and fear. "We're cautiously optimistic. She's showing neurological responses, and her organs appear to be functioning normally. However, I do have some concerns about her initial treatment." Dr. Morrison's expression grew serious. According to the medical records from Millbrook General, she was pronounced dead within hours of arrival. In cases of severe hypothermia, proper protocol requires extended resuscitation efforts and gradual rewarming. That doesn't appear to have happened. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Rebecca was the first to speak, her voice barely audible. "Dr. Reed didn't try to save her. He wanted her to die." "That's a serious accusation," Dr. Morrison said carefully. "But based on what I'm seeing here, the medical care she received was inadequate at best." Martha felt a cold fury building in her chest, sharper and more focused than any anger she had ever experienced. "Can you prove it? Can you prove that he didn't follow proper procedures?" "We'll need to review all the medical records and testimony from everyone involved," Dr. Morrison replied. "But yes, if what you're suggesting is true, there should be evidence." As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Reed himself appeared in the hospital corridor, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. He was sweating despite the cool air conditioning, and his hands shook as he approached the conference room. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "This is extraordinary. A miracle, really." Duke's reaction was immediate and violent. The German shepherd, who had been lying peacefully at Martha's feet, erupted into a frenzy of barking and snarling, his lips pulled back to reveal gleaming teeth. He lunged toward Dr. Reed with such force that Jonathan had to grab his collar to prevent an attack. "Easy, boy," Jonathan commanded, but Duke continued to strain against his grip, his amber eyes fixed on Dr. Reed with unmistakable hatred. Animals can sense things we can't, Martha said quietly, her eyes never leaving Dr. Reed's pale face. Dogs, especially. They can smell fear, guilt, deception. What are you afraid of, Doctor? Dr. Reed stepped back, his composure cracking. I don't know what you're implying, but we know about the other children, Rebecca interrupted suddenly, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. The ones who died under your care. We know you were at the pond on Tuesday. We know you had your medical bag with you. That's ridiculous, Dr. Reed protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I was at the hospital all afternoon. Check the records. We will, Dr. Morrison said firmly. In fact, I think it's time we involved the authorities. Sheriff Bradley needs to hear about this. Dr. Reed's face went ashen. He glanced around the room like a trapped animal, his eyes darting from face to face before settling on Duke's fierce gaze. You don't understand, he said desperately. I was trying to help. The organ donor list is so long, and there are children dying every day who could be saved if only— He stopped himself, but it was too late. The admission hung in the air like poison, confirming everyone's worst fears. If only what? Martha asked, her voice deadly quiet. If only you could harvest organs from healthy children. Dr. Reed's shoulders sagged in defeat. My daughter Emily died waiting for a heart transplant, 8 years old, and she died because there weren't enough donors. I thought if I could help just a few other families avoid that pain. By murdering innocent children? Jonathan's voice was barely human, a growl that rivaled Duke's intensity. It wasn't murder, Dr. Reed protested. I made it peaceful, painless, and their organs went to children who desperately needed them, children who lived because of their sacrifice. Martha stood slowly, her 72-year-old frame radiating a fury that seemed to fill the room. You tried to kill my granddaughter for her organs. You stood by that pond and watched her drown, then you made sure she wouldn't survive at the hospital. She was brain dead anyway, Dr. Reed said weakly. The hypothermia, the time underwater, even if she survived, she would have been a vegetable. At least this way, her death would have meaning. Except she wasn't brain dead, Dr. Morrison interjected. And she wasn't dying. If you had followed proper hypothermia protocols, she would have recovered days ago. The sound of footsteps in the corridor announced the arrival of Sheriff Tom Bradley and 2 deputies. Dr. Morrison had quietly called them during the conversation, and they had heard enough through the open door to understand the situation. Dr. Harrison Reed, Sheriff Bradley said formally, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Lily Rose Whitman and suspected involvement in the deaths of multiple other children. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Dr. Reed looked one last time at Duke, who had finally stopped barking but continued to watch him with unwavering intensity. That damned dog, he muttered. I should have had it put down when it started causing trouble. Martha's hand found Duke's head, her fingers tangling in his thick fur. Thank God you didn't listen to him, boy. Thank God you never gave up on our Lily. In the pediatric intensive care unit, Lily Rose Whitman slept peacefully for the first time in 3 days, her breathing steady and strong. Beside her bed, machines beeped with the reassuring rhythm of a life restored, while outside her window the Tennessee mountains stood sentinel against a sky painted with the colors of sunset and hope. The immediate aftermath of Dr. Reed's arrest brought a crushing wave of realization to everyone who had trusted him. As Sheriff Bradley led the disgraced doctor away in handcuffs, Martha felt the full weight of how close they had come to losing Lily forever. Not to a tragic accident, but to a man they had all welcomed into their homes, their lives, their most vulnerable moments. Jonathan collapsed into a waiting room chair, his hands covering his face as the magnitude of what had almost happened washed over him. 3 days, he whispered through his fingers. For 3 days, I thought my daughter was dead. I planned her funeral. I picked out flowers. I wrote a eulogy. His voice broke on the last word, raw with anguish and rage. Rebecca knelt beside him, her own tears falling freely. I'm so sorry, John. If I had been braver, if I had come forward immediately instead of running away. She took a shuddering breath. I could have prevented all of this. We all could have, Martha said quietly, her weathered hand resting on Duke's head as the dog maintained his vigil by the ICU doors. We all saw the signs. Duke's behavior, Dr. Reed's nervousness, the rushed death certificate, but we trusted authority over instinct. We trusted a medical degree over a dog's loyalty. Down the hall, investigators were already combing through Dr. Reed's office and medical records. What they found painted a picture of systematic murder disguised as medical care, an operation that had been running for over 2 years. Phone records revealed connections to underground organ trafficking networks, while financial records showed payments that corresponded suspiciously with the dates of unexplained child deaths. Dr. Morrison emerged from Lily's room with cautiously optimistic news. She's responding well to treatment, her brain activity is normal, and her vital signs are strengthening by the hour. The hypothermia caused some cellular damage, but nothing that appears to be permanent. She should make a full recovery. When will she wake up? Martha asked, hope and fear warring in her voice. It could be hours or days. Her body has been through tremendous trauma and it needs time to heal, but every indication suggests she'll be fine. Dr. Morrison paused, studying Duke's unwavering position by the ICU entrance. That dog of yours saved her life in more ways than one. If he hadn't refused to accept her death, if he hadn't kept vigil at the funeral home. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood that Duke's loyalty had given them the time they needed to discover the truth, to find Lily before it was too late. As news of Dr. Reed's arrest spread through Millbrook, the tight-knit community reeled with shock and betrayal. The man who had delivered their babies, treated their children's illnesses, and comforted their families through medical crises, had been systematically murdering the most vulnerable among them. Phone trees buzzed with horrified whispers as neighbors shared their own encounters with Dr. Reed, suddenly seeing sinister motives in previously benign interactions. The Morrison family recalled how Dr. Reed had insisted on handling their son's pneumonia case personally, despite the boy's quick recovery. The Petersons remembered how he had seemed unusually interested in their daughter's blood type during a routine checkup. The Hendersons realized that their nephew, who had died suddenly of heart failure 6 months earlier, had been perfectly healthy just days before his death. By evening, Sheriff Bradley's office was flooded with calls from families demanding investigations into deaths that had previously been accepted as tragic but natural. The scope of Dr. Reed's crimes was becoming clear, and it was far worse than anyone had imagined. Martha remained at the hospital through the night, sleeping fitfully in a chair beside Lily's bed while Duke maintained his protective watch from a corner of the room. The nurses had tried repeatedly to remove the dog, citing hospital regulations, but Dr. Morrison had overruled them. "That animal has shown better medical instincts than most doctors I know," she said firmly. "He stays." Around 3 in the morning, Duke suddenly lifted his head, his ears perked with alertness. He rose to his feet and approached Lily's bed, his tail wagging tentatively as he sniffed the air. Martha stirred in her chair, instantly awake with the hypervigilance of someone who had lived through too much trauma in too short a time. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, then gasped as she saw Lily's eyelids flutter. The child's eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. Her lips moved soundlessly for a moment before she managed a single, barely audible word. "Duke?" Martha's heart nearly burst with joy and relief. She pressed the call button for the nurses while tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm here, baby girl. Duke's here too. You're safe now. You're safe." Duke approached the bed carefully, his massive frame trembling with excitement and restraint. When Lily's small hand moved weakly toward him, he gently licked her fingers, his tail wagging with such force that it shook his entire body. "Grandma Marty?" Lily's voice was hoarse, confused. "Why does everything hurt? Where's Daddy?" "Daddy's coming, sweetheart. He went home to shower and change clothes, but he'll be right back." Martha smoothed Lily's blonde curls away from her forehead, marveling at the warmth of her skin, the alertness returning to her blue eyes. "You've been very sick, but you're getting better now." "I had the strangest dream," Lily said softly, her words slurred with exhaustion. "I was floating in dark water and I couldn't breathe, but I could hear Duke barking, calling me back. He wouldn't let me go." Martha exchanged a meaningful look with Duke, whose amber eyes seemed to hold depths of understanding that transcended species. "Dogs are smarter than we give them credit for," she told Lily. "Duke knew you needed him, and he never gave up on you." The medical team that responded to Martha's call confirmed what everyone hoped. Lily was going to be fine. Her neurological responses were normal, her cognitive function intact. The hypothermia had caused some temporary disorientation and muscle weakness, but with time and physical therapy she would make a complete recovery. When Jonathan arrived an hour later, his reunion with his daughter was a moment of pure joy that even the hardened medical staff found moving. He held her carefully as if she might disappear again, while she peppered him with questions about why everyone looked so worried and why Duke seemed so excited to see her. "You scared us, Princess," Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You scared us really, really bad." "I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to fall in the pond. I was trying to get away from the scary man, and I slipped on the rocks." Jonathan's blood chilled. Even now, even after Dr. Reed's arrest, hearing Lily confirm that she had been running from him made the horror feel fresh and raw. "The scary man can't hurt you anymore, sweetheart. He's gone, and he's never coming back." Rebecca arrived as dawn was breaking over the mountains, carrying a small stuffed elephant that had been Lily's favorite toy before she left. Her approach to the hospital bed was tentative, uncertain, weighed down by 3 years of abandonment and the fresh trauma of almost losing her daughter forever. "Hi, baby," she said softly, her voice shaking. "Do you remember me?" Lily studied her mother with the direct, uncompromising gaze that only children possess. "You're my mommy. You went away." "I did. And I'm sorrier about that than I can ever tell you." Rebecca placed the stuffed elephant on the bed, her hands trembling. "I was sick, in my head and my heart, and I made terrible choices. But I'm getting better now. And if you'll let me, I want to try to be the mommy you deserve." "Are you going to go away again?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Rebecca looked at Jonathan, at Martha, at the daughter she had failed so completely, and made a choice that would define the rest of their lives. "No," she said firmly. "I'm never leaving you again. I'm going to finish getting well, and then I'm coming home to stay, if Daddy and Grandma Marty will let me." Martha watched this family reconciliation with mixed emotions. Rebecca had caused so much pain, had abandoned them when they needed her most, but she had also provided crucial testimony that helped expose Dr. Reed's crimes, and the genuine anguish in her eyes suggested that her remorse was real. "Families forgive," Martha said finally, thinking of her own grandmother's wisdom about second chances. "That's what families do. But trust has to be earned back, one day at a time." As the sun rose fully over Knoxville, painting the hospital room in golden light, Lily drifted back to sleep with Duke's head resting on the bed beside her. The German shepherd's vigil had finally ended in victory, his unwavering faith in his little girl vindicated by her return to the world of the living. The nightmare was over, but the healing would take time. There would be investigations, trials, therapy sessions, and long conversations about trust and forgiveness. But for now, in this moment, all that mattered was that Lily Rose Whitman was alive, surrounded by people who loved her, protected by a dog whose loyalty had literally moved mountains. Outside the window, Millbrook was waking up to a new day, one without Dr. Harrison Reed, one where the truth had finally come to light, one where a community would have to rebuild trust and learn to listen more carefully to the voices of those who couldn't speak for themselves. 3 weeks after Lily's miraculous awakening, the full scope of Dr. Harrison Reed's crimes began to emerge through the meticulous work of state investigators and FBI agents who had taken over the case. What they uncovered was a systematic operation that had claimed the lives of at least 12 children across 3 counties over the past 2 years, with Lily being the first intended victim to survive. The investigation revealed that Dr. Reed had been part of a sophisticated organ trafficking network that operated throughout rural Appalachia, targeting small communities where medical oversight was minimal and trust in local doctors ran deep. His method was insidiously simple: identify healthy children with rare blood types or compatible organs, create medical emergencies or exploit existing accidents, then pronounce death prematurely to harvest organs before the families could seek second opinions. Sheriff Bradley sat across from Martha in her living room, his weathered face heavy with the burden of delivering devastating news to families who had already grieved their children. The forensic pathologist from Nashville re-examined the bodies we were able to exhume, he said quietly. Every single one of those children could have survived their initial injuries with proper medical care. Dr. Reed essentially murdered them through medical negligence, then profited from their organs. Martha's hands trembled as she poured coffee, the familiar ritual providing some comfort in the face of such overwhelming evil. Lily was upstairs napping, her recovery progressing remarkably well, but the child still had nightmares about the scary man and clung to Duke with an intensity that broke everyone's hearts. "How many families?" Martha asked, though she dreaded the answer. 15 confirmed victims, possibly more. The network was paying him anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 per child, depending on the organs harvested. Sheriff Bradley accepted the coffee cup with grateful hands. The worst part is how long it went on. If Duke hadn't refused to accept Lily's death, if you hadn't trusted that dog's instincts over medical authority, Reed might have continued for years. The revelation had shattered Millbrook's sense of security in ways that would take generations to heal. Parents questioned every medical interaction their children had ever had with Dr. Reed. The hospital where he had practiced was under federal investigation, and several nurses and administrators had been placed on administrative leave, pending inquiries into what they might have known or suspected. Jonathan had taken extended leave from both his jobs to be with Lily during her recovery, and the financial strain was beginning to show. Medical bills from Knoxville General were mounting, and while Lily's physical health was improving daily, she would need therapy for the psychological trauma of her ordeal. The community had organized fundraisers, but pride made it difficult for Jonathan to accept charity, even from well-meaning neighbors. "The FBI Victims' Compensation Fund will cover most of the medical expenses," Sheriff Bradley explained. "And there's talk of a civil lawsuit against Dr. Reed's estate and the hospital. Won't bring those children back, but it might help the families rebuild." Martha nodded, but her thoughts were on Rebecca, who had been attending daily counseling sessions in Knoxville while staying at a halfway house for women in recovery. The revelation of Dr. Reed's crimes had somehow made Rebecca's abandonment seem less like betrayal and more like a symptom of her illness. Jonathan was slowly warming to the idea of supervised visits, especially after Lily had specifically asked to see her mother again. "There's something else," Sheriff Bradley said, his voice careful. "The district attorney wants Rebecca to testify at Reed's trial. Her eyewitness account of what happened at the pond is crucial evidence. But given her history with addiction and her absence during the initial investigation, Reed's defense team is going to attack her credibility hard. "She'll do it," Martha said with quiet certainty. "Rebecca's got a lot to atone for, and she knows it. Testifying against that monster is the least she can do for Lily and all those other families." Duke wandered into the living room from his post at the bottom of the stairs, where he had been listening for any sound from Lily's room. Since coming home from the hospital, the German shepherd had barely left the child's side, as if he were making up for the 3 days when he couldn't protect her. His sleep was fitful, filled with whimpers and small barks, and Martha suspected he was having his own version of nightmares about almost losing his beloved little girl. "That dog's become something of a celebrity," Sheriff Bradley observed, scratching Duke behind the ears. "News stations from as far away as Nashville want to do stories about the loyal dog who wouldn't give up. Some Hollywood producer even called about movie rights." Martha snorted with derision. "Duke's not for sale, and neither is our story. We've had enough attention to last a lifetime." The constant stream of reporters and curiosity seekers had been exhausting, forcing Martha to post no trespassing signs and ask neighbors to help screen visitors. "I understand completely, but there is one thing you might want to consider." Sheriff Bradley pulled a folder from his briefcase. "The American Kennel Club wants to nominate Duke for their Hero Dog Award. It comes with a $25,000 donation to a charity of your choice. Thought you might want to put it toward a fund for families of Reed's victims." Before Martha could respond, small footsteps on the stairs announced Lily's awakening from her nap. Duke immediately rose and trotted to the foot of the staircase, his tail wagging as Lily appeared, blonde curls tousled and clutching the stuffed elephant Rebecca had brought to the hospital. "Grandma Marty, can Duke and I go play in the backyard?" Lily asked, then noticed Sheriff Bradley and immediately moved closer to Martha's chair. The child had developed a wariness around unfamiliar men that her therapist said was a normal trauma response. "Of course, sweetheart, but stay where I can see you from the kitchen window." Martha's voice carried an edge of anxiety that hadn't been there before Dr. Reed's betrayal. Trust, once shattered, was difficult to rebuild. As Lily and Duke headed outside, Martha watched through the window as they settled into their new routine. Lily would sit on the porch steps while Duke positioned himself between her and the yard, always alert, always watchful. The child had lost some of her fearless independence, but she was slowly regaining confidence with Duke's constant reassurance. "She's lucky to have him," Sheriff Bradley observed. "And he's lucky to have a family that listens to what he's trying to tell them." "I keep thinking about all the times we almost ignored him," Martha confessed. "All the times we almost trusted Dr. Reed over Duke's instincts. What kind of world have we created where we trust certificates and degrees more than love and loyalty?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that extended far beyond their small town. The Dr. Reed scandal had exposed vulnerabilities in rural healthcare systems across the country, prompting federal legislation and oversight reforms. But for Martha, the lesson was more personal and profound. Wisdom came in many forms, and sometimes the most important truths were spoken by those who couldn't use words. A car pulled into the driveway, and Martha recognized Rebecca's borrowed Honda. Her former daughter-in-law was making good on her promise to rebuild her relationship with Lily, visiting every day when her counseling schedule permitted. The transformation in Rebecca over the past 3 weeks had been remarkable, clean, sober, and focused on making amends for her failures. Jonathan emerged from the kitchen where he had been preparing dinner, his expression neutral but not unwelcoming as Rebecca approached the house. Their interactions were still careful, formal, weighted with years of hurt and disappointment, but they were talking. For Lily's sake, they were finding ways to be civil, even cooperative. "How are you feeling today?" Rebecca asked Lily as she settled onto the porch steps beside her daughter, maintaining the careful distance that Jonathan had requested. Better. Duke and I practiced his tricks. He can shake hands and roll over and play dead, but I don't like the playing dead part anymore. Lily's matter-of-fact delivery of this observation made all the adults exchange meaningful glances. That's okay, baby. You don't have to practice anything that makes you uncomfortable. Rebecca's voice was gentle, patient in a way it had never been during her active addiction. What would you like to do instead? Teach Duke to dance? He's really smart. He saved my life, you know. Everyone says so. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Duke, the dog who had done what she, as Lily's mother, had failed to do, protect her child when it mattered most. Yes, sweetheart. Everyone says so. And everyone's right. 6 months later, on a warm April morning that smelled of honeysuckle and new beginnings, Martha stood in her kitchen watching the most beautiful sight she had ever seen, Lily laughing as she chased Duke around the backyard, both of them gloriously, wonderfully alive. The trial of Dr. Harrison Reed had concluded 3 weeks earlier with a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Rebecca's testimony had been crucial, delivered with a clarity and strength that surprised everyone who remembered the broken woman who had fled Millbrook years earlier. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 15 counts of murder. Jonathan appeared beside Martha at the window, slipping his arm around her shoulders as they watched their daughter play. The past months had aged him, carved new lines around his eyes and silver into his hair, but there was peace in his expression that hadn't been there since Lily's accident. "Rebecca's moving back next week," he said quietly, "into the old Peterson place on Oak Street, close enough to be part of Lily's life, far enough away that we can take things slow." Martha nodded approvingly. Rebecca had completed her rehabilitation program with distinction, found steady work at a veterinary clinic in Knoxville, and most importantly, had proven through consistent actions that her commitment to recovery was real. Trust was being rebuilt one day at a time, one kept promise at a time. "And you're okay with that?" Martha asked, though she could see the answer in his relaxed posture, the way he smiled when Lily waved at them through the window. "I'm learning that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened," Jonathan replied. "It's about choosing love over anger, hope over fear." Lily deserves to have her mother back, and Rebecca's earned the chance to try. Duke had positioned himself in his favorite spot beneath the old oak tree, where he could observe the entire yard while staying close to Lily. The nightmares had finally stopped, both his and theirs, replaced by peaceful sleep and dreams of better tomorrows. The American Kennel Club had indeed awarded Duke their hero dog title, and the $25,000 prize had gone toward establishing a foundation for families affected by medical malpractice. Duke himself seemed utterly indifferent to his celebrity status, caring only that his family was whole and safe. As Martha watched Lily attempt to teach Duke a new trick involving jumping through a hula hoop, she felt her grandmother's presence almost tangibly, that wise woman's voice echoing across the decades. "Animals know things we've forgotten how to see, child." "Thank you," Martha whispered to the morning air, to her grandmother's memory, to Duke's unwavering loyalty, to the mysterious forces that had brought their little girl home. "Thank you for never letting us give up." Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the simplest sources. A loyal dog's unwavering faith, a grandmother's intuition, a community's willingness to question authority when love demands it. Martha Sullivan's story reminds us that in our golden years, we've earned the right to trust our instincts over credentials, to value loyalty over convenience, and to believe that miracles still happen when we refuse to give up hope. Duke didn't care about medical degrees or death certificates. He only knew that love doesn't end with the doctor's pronouncement. How many times in our own lives have we dismissed that inner voice, that gut feeling, because someone with authority told us we were wrong? Martha's courage to trust Duke's devotion over Dr. Reed's expertise saved not just Lily's life, but exposed a predator who had been hiding behind respectability for years. As we navigate healthcare decisions for ourselves and our families, as we watch our grandchildren grow in an increasingly complex world, this story reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is listening to love over logic, faith over fear. Our life experience has taught us to recognize authentic devotion when we see it, whether it comes from a four-legged friend or the depths of our own hearts. Questions for reflection. Have you ever had a moment when your instincts told you something was wrong, even when experts said otherwise? What animals or relationships in your life have shown you the kind of unconditional loyalty that Duke demonstrated? Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear about the Dukes in your own lives who never gave up on you.